All right. Today's meeting is we're discussing alcohol, the uses of alcohol in cooking and in baking. To begin with, we, of course, when we're talking about alcohol, we're talking about wines, we're talking about beer, liquors, brandy, and the like. Spirits, you name it. It's about our experiences and what we have gone through, and how we have used alcohol in our cooking. I, in particular, have only ventured into cooking with wines and sauces when I'm cooking a particular special beef sauce. I like to use the wine. It adds a bit of complexity into the meal. I like the way the wine adds complexity to the meals. I've never experienced white wine in food, but I'm sure if you're making a complex white meat dish, white wine will do it. I struggle though using wines a lot because I'm looking at it as I would prefer to drink it than cook with it. But when I want to give it a nice twist, my meal that is, I add a bit of wine. I know people have used beer a lot in cooking, and also I've eaten some foods with beer. So some particular person cooked beans with beer, which was quite an interesting taste at the end. And those are the two flavors that I've experienced so far when it comes to alcohol. I try to find the cheapest red wine that I can find if I'm going to cook with red wine, but I've also heard about cooking wines. I've not had I've not gotten a chance to have them, to use them, whether they are cheap or not. I don't know where to get the cooking wines, but I'm usually told that it's cheaper to buy cooking wine than buying a good Chardonnay or you name it, or whichever. But that is my experience with alcohol. Please feel free to start and add to the discussion. Yes, Mark.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
I have had quite a very interesting number of years cooking with alcohol. In fact, at one point, I used to be called the drunken chef because not only do I drink it while I'm cooking, but I also cook with it. And my journey started a very long time ago when there was this very cheap, much younger, because my mother used to put rum and brandy in her cakes to preserve them. And I ended up drinking all her brandy at the time, all her rum. But that's a story for another day. Okay. But I remember there was a very, very cheap wine on the market called Penasol, which used to come in a box. Somebody brought me that box of Penasol. Once I tasted it, it was nasty. So I decided to cook with it. And I remember that time I marinated my pork in it, and I loved the flavor. The Penasol was only nice when it came to marinating pork. Yes, it's still on the market, but has shifted now into bottles, and I've not tasted it in many, many years. But then I started to experiment with other alcohols in my cooking. And what I find is that they bring different types of alcohol bring different flavors onto the table. For example, I like cooking beef in Guinness. Guinness is it's bitter to taste, but when you cook your beef in it for a while, take a few hours while cooking in the beef, it comes out tender and a bit sweetish, which I found rather interesting.
Why didn't you use wine?
I've used there's a chef called Ina Garten. I learned how to make meatballs using her recipe, and she said use a Chianti or a very good dry wine. So when I use the Chianti, I've never tasted meatballs any better than those.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't skip. When it comes to cooking with wine, I actually get a very nice, expensive bottle, and I use that.
Really?
I find that, the cheaper
Ah,
ones don't
okay.
really do it for me. Then,
Okay.
of course, beer in my pork all the time. I like to use lighter beers when it comes to cooking sauces, stews like pork stews. I'd rather
Okay.
use a light beer, a Nile Gold or a Tusker Light or a Castle Light.
Mm.
Beef, Guinness, meatballs, a Chianti or a nice dry red wine.
Yeah.
That's what my experience is like cooking with alcohol. I've not yet, of course, we've tried brandy, deglazing pans and everything, but that fire really scares me. So I'd rather drink that. Back to you, James.
All right. All right. I like that you mentioned a bit of whiskey, which is something I also want to find out about from others. But Karunga, do you have anything to say?
Morning, everybody. So I use alcohol mainly for my bakes, particularly if I have to bake for somebody who likes a particular drink. When I'm decorating the cakes, instead of using syrup, I infuse with, so if it's a Jack Daniel themed cake, then I'll infuse that into the cake. I also,
Okay.
pardon?
You actually infuse the Jack Daniels into the cake.
Yes, so I poke holes into the cake. So you can sprinkle or spray syrup onto the cakes to keep them moist. So I do it with the Jack Daniels, and they love it. So I don't take alcohol, so I haven't tasted these cakes. I I particularly use for my bakes. There's a Jamaican red wine that I use, and I stick to their rum as well. I find it better.
Okay.
And for decorating as well, I use vodka. I get cheap vodka when I'm going to paint the cakes. If I'm going to use, say, food color, but the dust.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm going to use that, I use vodka and a paintbrush. Put the powder in there, and you paint on the cakes, and it dries instantly. It's
Okay.
perfect.
Wow.
I also use beer. There's a beer cake recipe that someone shared with me, and people love the cakes. As I said, I haven't eaten those, but yeah, that's. I do cook with red wine. I use that same Jamaican one to add to the beef or meatballs as well.
I find that
Pardon?
Where do you find the Jamaican wine?
I get it. I'm in the UK, so I even get it in one of our supermarkets and the Jamaican stores. I'll share a photo of it just in case it's readily available in Kampala as well. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are those cakes friendly for children? Because I'm hearing a lot of alcohol in there, and then you decorate with vodka. Are they safe for children? Don't they get people a bit tipsy or something?
The one you decorate with the vodka is fine because it evaporates on the cake, and it's a small amount. But I wouldn't serve the cakes that have been infused with alcohol to the children. Even the fruit cakes. If I've baked a fruit cake or a cake, if somebody orders a cake and I know there'll be children, I always add a second layer without alcohol and let them know which one's free, alcohol free for the kids. But I personally wouldn't give children. Yes.
And then
so
when you talk about
down to the parents' discretion.
Okay.
And then when you talked about cooking with a Jamaican wine, is there particular dishes you use, or it's sauces? Do you also put the wine in other things like pastas and stuff?
No, I
Pasta
don't.
sauces?
I don't. I haven't put in pasta sauces. I'm sure you can as well. But I stick to, if I'm cooking a beef stew or meatballs, then I do.
I see. I'm surprised though you picked Jamaican wine. Have you tried other wines for you to conclude that Jamaican is the best?
The reason why I made a Jamaican rum cake, and that's how I started to use that red wine after, and I've simply just continued with it because it gives a particular taste.
I see.
And because I don't particularly, I wouldn't have wine in my kitchen or in my house. I wouldn't be experimenting with it.
I get it. Get it.
Yeah. So I'd purposely have to go out to buy the wine to use it to
share the beer cake recipe. I'm sure Abid would like to try that.
I will do. I definitely will.
Yeah. Yes,
James, just for reference,
what has been
I've shared the Aina Garten's meatball recipe in the chat.
I saw it.
So if anybody wants, they can go and check it out there.
Yeah. Yes, Stella? Do you share your experience with alcohol, apart from drinking? Stella?
Shame on you, James. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I really don't have much to say, except I agree with a lot of what Mark pointed out, because I do that quite a lot, especially with the red meats. I always just go for dry red wines, and I've done a meatball recipe with wine, and it was delicious. But that's about it. Maybe the beer, and yes, Guinness again with beef, like the red meats. That's about it for me, because I don't really bake. Yeah, and but I do drink though.
Yes.
Maybe also just the whiskey with if you're doing roasts as a marinade. There's a bit of nice flavor that's added to that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and that's about it for me.
I get it. And the Germans also, I feel like the Germans have done also a lot of experience with beer. I know that I had one time that they can boil their bratwursts in beer. Like you can boil the sausages in beer just to give it another twist instead of using water. I happened to also have watched something yesterday by chance. It was one of those food channel episodes, Food Network channel episodes. And this particular person, they were doing a chili recipe and they added a bit of alcohol in the mayonnaise, chili, and the salt, and it gave it a greater twist to the flavors. And I found that, and it was like a strong brandy, that's a shot. But I felt that it was the first time that I could see that you can use alcohol for something finished, like a finished food. Made me think that perhaps even considering it in adding to a salad or a particular dish afterwards could actually give it a nice twist. So I've not experienced it afterwards as in any other way, but that's also a thought. You can actually add something, and even in the channel, they pointed out that was That was a good twist. They could not have seen it that way, but it worked out. So who knows? We could still keep experimenting on our alcohols. Yes, Mark.
I've also done my glazes. All my glazes for my pork chops and ribs have either brandy or bourbon in them.
Really?
When you try it with whiskey or with rum, rum is a bit too sweet. Whiskey is a bit too smoky. But bourbon, on the other hand, bourbon and brandy,
Yes.
cognac, they give them a nice sweetish, and it balances out with the chilies if you use chilies in your glazes. So I find I use a honey bourbon or a honey brandy, and it always comes out very nice and sticky and glossy.
Okay.
About alcohol in salad,
the person who used it was saying, what was the one? Okay.
Alcohol in the salad dressing, I don't know, but I think I could see it.
I actually could see it working really, especially if it's like a sweet alcohol, I would see it working with like a brandy, I think, or a sherry, just to add a little bit of a sweetness. I don't know, but when it was mentioned. When it was mentioned, I kind of could see the potential in that. So unfortunately, I don't do salads much, so I won't be trying that anytime soon.
I'm going to try it over the weekend, James, if you can share. If you can share, a link or something so that I see exactly what they did. Then I'll try it this weekend when I do my barbecue. But I won't serve the kids. And then I'll struggle to do what with the rest of the bottle.
Yeah. In fact, I was quite impressed by Karunga. The other day we were talking about fruitcakes with a bit, and we were talking about how it is such a struggle to find a good fruitcake in Uganda. Like the concept of a fruitcake is about alcohol and good putting it together quite well, and we could never seem to find a good one here in Uganda. So please note that. You might say it in passing, but fruitcakes are quite rare here in Uganda. A good fruitcake.
I think it's mostly that I think many people have become quite stingy with the amount of alcohol they use, because I feel like a fruitcake is supposed to be brandy heavy, and most of the brandies, at least from most of the brandies, I don't know if there's a reasonably priced brandy. So I think that's the biggest problem. So they use alternatives and it doesn't work quite well.
Yeah.
But I agree. I had fruitcakes because of that. And yet I remember.
You remember? Stella, you remember?
Sorry? Oh, no, I was saying back in the day, I think fruitcakes were so much better than now, I think.
Exactly. Yes, Mark.
Yes, I was saying that Karuka agencies brought a reasonably priced brandy called Legend. Then I think they took it off the market because not many people took to it. But talking of fruitcakes, I remember.
Yeah, it wasn't that good.
It wasn't? Huh? Well, I don't know. I just used to drink it.
It wasn't.
Back in the day, I remember my mother. I used to just drink it. I never used to cook with it. It was there for the drinking. But I remember it was reasonably priced. But I was telling you about my mother's fruitcake. And I remember those cakes were quite, yes, she was heavy-handed on the brandy, but the cakes were very moist and colorful and nice and a bit heavy. These days, the fruitcakes I see are dry and they just generally bore me. I should call this lady and ask her to bake me another cake so I can remember what a fruitcake should taste like. Exactly. I don't know, Karunga, if you can tell us what a good fruitcake should be like and how much brandy to other ingredients we need.
Sorry, before Karunga, but I think the biggest problem, especially on the pastry market currently, is that people are not, because I feel like pastries are supposed to be very precise. Baking is more of a precise, what can I call it? Art. Oh, I don't even know if I can hold it art. Anyway, but I feel like nowadays there are very few really good pastry places where you can say, if I go here, I'm actually going to get something really good.
Mm.
And I have checked around. There are some places that are decent. You'll get something decent, but really good. Especially if you're the kind who likes the fluffy cakes where it's moist and it doesn't just crumble because of how hard and dry it is. Yeah, it is tricky right now. But I do have some recommendations. If anyone is interested, I can put them in chat.
Please, please. Is Capisserie one of them? Yes, Karunga.
They do have a mean.
Karunga, please do share
Yes,
with us a good fruitcake recipe for us. For us who have not had it in such a long time.
I mean, I infuse, if I'm making one for somebody who wants to have alcohol in it, I infuse my fruits for sometimes 3 weeks ahead. So the longer you infuse or you soak your fruit, the more moist the cake will be. I also discovered there's a browning sauce that they use for the Jamaican rum cake that also adds to how moist your cake is. But for those whom I don't add alcohol, when I finish my bakes, once they've cooled, I wrap them in cling film. Sorry. I wrap them in cling film and keep them in the fridge or freezer, depending on how far ahead I have to decorate the cake. So that seems to do the trick for me, wrapping the cake rather than leaving it out. Or if I'm going to put it in an airtight container, I still wrap it in cling film until I crumb coat the cake.
I see.
Those
are there any ratios you can advise on brandy to fruit?
I can share the Jamaican, that particular recipe, because it's the only one I use. Most people, the majority of people that I bake for are Muslim, and they wouldn't have alcohol in their cakes, so I don't add it in most of my fruit cakes. So it's on the odd occasion that I do.
I see.
Yes.
Please do. Now we have a beer cake and fruit cake coming from you.
Yes, I will share with you once I get back home.
Sure.
I have another question for Stella. Stella talked of not having good enough brandy on the market. What brandy do you use? Is KWV part of it? Or do you go heavy on the Martels and things like that?
No, I do not.
You have muted, Stella. You have muted yourself.
Sorry. So I was saying I don't bake, so I don't use that much brandy. Really, I was just making an observation that for most people, some of the brandies in the market are too, I think, high-end. Most of the brandies in the market are high-end and they might not use as much.
You know, that's the thing I find rather interesting. Because, for example, the people who've ordered meatballs, like now when I'm making meatballs for you or for anybody who orders, there's no other way I'm going to make these meatballs except Aina Gatten's recipe. And a bottle of Chianti is about 60-something thousand shillings. I put that figure into the cost of the meatballs to you. So for me, I don't think high-end brandy being costly should be a factor into making a good cake or to produce something good for a client. All I think is pass the cost on, because the client should be able to appreciate the quality of ingredients you're putting into your offering. So I think that is not a very good excuse from the bakers out there who say we can't find a good brandy to make you a good cake.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes and no, and I do get where you're coming from, but also that I guess would also depend on their usual clientele. Like it would be good if you had like one person who is, I guess if the person is willing to pay it, yes. But for most people, their usual clientele, and they do not make, some people are not willing, most people are not willing to pay the premium price for the good stuff. So they usually find alternatives and they ride the middle. You understand?
Mm.
I understand. I've had a few of those, and after the event, they call me crying and making complaints, and I say, yeah, next time throw in the extra shillings, excuse me, and we'll give you something good. Because I learned that if you do the best recipe you can, and alcohol, to me, always adds a difference to things you're cooking. I'll give you another example. Most times when I'm roasting, even here at home, I keep pouring beer on top of my pork while it's cooking, just to keep the flavors burning and the sugars burning on top. Other people, I see them putting other liquids like water and what. I use beer, and the flavor is just very much more interesting than because these days my pork I only do salt and pepper, so I find what I add during the cooking process adds a bit more flavor and other tones to what I'm cooking.
Yeah. I've been using Coke at the moment. But I'll try out the beer.
Try a light beer. Try a very light beer, and then you will tell me on Monday.
Yes, I will. In fact, I might use it this Thursday for the guys. I like that Karunga had actually mentioned something about soaking of fruits, and there's that aspect of soaking that I felt that alcohol has a lot to offer. I wanted to ask her, what does she soak the fruit in? And I remember having sweets and desserts soaked in I've forgotten what it was, and I just loved the flavor. And I'm trying to recall what sweet it was, but I know that cakes can be glazed with also alcohol, maybe even something like a thick marula kind of thickness. Marula. I'm trying to look for another one. Baileys. I've heard of Baileys. Yes, Bailey sweets. So I've also heard of Bailey glazing. How do they do that, and how is that achieved? Sorry that we are asking about it, yet you don't eat it, but I'm hoping you can make it.
I haven't seen any Amarula or Bailey glazed cakes. I'm going to look it up and see, because I'm keen on trying out new recipes and adding to what I do. With the fruit, I soak it in rum and red wine.
Oh, red wine.
It's a Jamaican red wine that I use. It's a particular one.
I see.
But I know you can use brandy. I want to start trying to infuse the fruit with other alcohol to see what feedback I get as well.
I see.
But it's not something that I've done regularly. So
I see.
it's new to me as well.
As you can clearly see also that I find that the baking aspect of baking uses a lot of alcohol, much more than our cooking. But I think I remember flambe is also something that Chinese use. Is it Chinese or Japanese? I'm not sure which cuisine that is. As though to light up the food. Has anyone tried or experienced that by chance? I've seen when I see in the episodes, you see somebody pouring some nice alcohol just to light up to flambe the food. And I kept wondering, usually it's a brandy, but I kept wondering if somebody has actually experienced it and what does it add to the food?
I have. I've done it a couple of times, but to be honest, I didn't see any difference that it brought to the food at all. Yeah.
Because the reason I'm
maybe I
asking
did it wrongly. I don't know, but
doesn't alcohol evaporate? So when it comes to food, there's so little you can do with it, other than a saucy type of way. And
I
maybe
used to think it all evaporates, but some people have told me that that's not necessarily the case, that some of it stays behind. Actually, a lot of it stays behind. It depends on how long it takes you to cook it out. The longer you cook out, the more alcohol will reduce. But flambe is always a quick, drop it there, flash whatever it, and then serve. So I don't think a lot of it gets cooked out that way.
Interesting. Oh, okay. Okay, good to know. Good to know. Yes, that has we have explored alcohol for tenderizing, for marinades, for cooking sauces, for baking, cooking, for marinating, for glazes, cooking sauces, that is, for glazes, for cake, and also for during cooks, for spraying over meats during cooks. Has anybody else, and also flambe? Karunga, I see your hand. Is there something you want to mention, to add?
I've also seen on the food channels, there are people who sit their chicken on a can of beer and cook it that way. So you open the can of beer after you've marinated your chicken, you sit it on the can of beer and you let it cook.
Oh, that's true.
So I think it's one worth trying.
Yeah, I always thought that they add something to that. It's not necessarily beer. I thought somebody drinks the beer and then they add like water and spice.
No.
Actually, I've done that quite a number of times, and I'll tell you that you get a nice aroma in the chicken, and it's always moist. But you don't add anything to the beer, boss, and I don't think you can drink that beer after.
Okay.
Pour it out after.
The contents of the beer and then add spices.
What you do is that depending on the size of the can, you can maybe reduce it by sipping off a bit of it, just to give some space for the steam to rise and everything. But you always get a nice, moist, flavorful chicken.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Oh, and another thing, you said alcohol for tenderizing. That's another myth. Alcohol does not tenderize meat.
Really?
No, it does not. It just gives flavor.
Oh, okay. I don't know, because I felt that because it has alcohol, it penetrates and works
you'd
on
be thinking of acid, but alcohol is not acid.
That's a good question. Is alcohol acidic? I thought it was acidic.
I don't think it is.
Let me actually. Okay. Yes, so we have explored all those different aspects of beer. I'm quite amused by some of your pointers. I never knew that different flavor. I mean, the price, the more expensive the wine, the better the flavor on food. I used to think when it comes to food, it doesn't really matter about the pricing. So I would try using a more expensive wine and say I used to look for the cheapest wine just to get the flavors. So
the concept is don't cook with what you can't consume. If you get a very bad bottle of wine that you can't consume, do you think you'll enjoy it in your meat if you cook with it? No.
I see. Okay. I think I just always I used to look at it in terms of price. I'm actually trying to make sure we can confirm whether it's acidic alcohol. I'm just Googling a bit. Oh, yes, you're right. It's not acidic. Unless you combine it with something, it's not acidic. So, especially when it's in water, when it's mixed with other things, it becomes even less possible to become acidic. Yes, Mark, you're right. It's not used to tenderize. Knowing that, okay, so we have explored those above topics. I also mentioned something about salads. I can also add it in salads, except I've not experienced it as much. I could see the potential of it when you can see that you can add alcohol after, not before. Sweets and cakes we have completed. Is there anything else that I might have missed out? And is there any question that you'd want to bring up based on the alcohol topic? Otherwise, I'm trying to see if I've missed out anything else. And so far, I think we have exhausted and learned for my case in particular.
Do you know what my best ice cream flavor is?
Rum and raisins?
Rum and raisin. Rum and raisin.
Oh,
nothing beats rum and raisin.
I'd forgotten about that.
I may be considered an alcoholic at this point, but rum and raisin is a fantastic.
Oh, yes.
Ice cream flavor.
Yes. Ice cream, of course. Oh, that's so true. That's so true. I totally enjoy rum and raisins indeed. But yes, I also
know what I think I'm saying is that Karunga needs to experiment. Let me go soak my raisins in rum for 3 weeks, mix it in my vanilla ice cream.
Yes.
And see what will happen after that.
Yes. The problem is you need the machine to make the ice cream as well.
Do I really? I can borrow one, I think. I think there's some ice creams you can make without really using a machine, as long as you have a freezer. Karunga wants to say something?
Yes, Karunga.
You don't need a machine to make ice cream. A mason jar, you just keep shaking. That does the trick.
A mason jar?
There's a mason jar ice cream recipe on YouTube. I'll share that as well. So you don't need a machine to make ice cream.
Really?
Nope, you don't. And it tastes good as well.
Thanks for that. Mark your hand. Yes, Stella.
You can make your homemade ice cream.
Okay. Thanks for that. Yes, Stella.
When the topic of ice cream started, I just kind of wanted to add this. Like, you know how you make smoothies? They're really fruity, where you mix up a bunch of tropical fruits in the smoothie, right? I usually just add, of course, I add chia seeds, I add the yogurt, and instead of adding more milk, like to make it a bit, or water, I just leave it a bit more thick and put it in the freezer. So that's like how I make my ice cream substitutes.
I see. Yeah. Well,
so smoothie with rum and raisins. Okay, got it.
Yeah, now that you've mentioned all this, you've just reminded me, of course, cocktails cannot be missed out when it comes to alcohol, fruit cocktails. You can actually add to alcohol, it gives it a very nice twist to any fruit combination. Sangria is not sangria without the wine and without the fruits. So there's also that aspect where you can add fruits to your alcohol. I don't know if I'm not good with cocktails and any other combination, but I just know sangria is the go-to type of dish when it comes to fruit and wine. And you need to soak it for quite a while as well to get that nice. Oh yes, alcohol does make things much better. So yeah, I also find this is wines and fruits, definitely, I think. Funny. Bacon doesn't make everything as good as wine or alcohol. But yes, Karunga, is there anything? I thought Karunga's hand was up from the previous time. Do you have anything else to add, Karunga?
Sorry, I lowered my hand.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. A little fact that we mentioned it earlier, and I wanted to research on it. Just so you know, when you're cooking alcohol, if you take 25 minutes or 15 to 25 minutes, you reserve 40% of the alcohol. When you cook it for about almost 1 hour, it's 35. 1 hour and 15 minutes, 25, 1.5 hours, 20%, 2 hours, 10%. So for sure, the shorter the time for cooking, the more the alcohol is retained in the dish. Just so you know. And when it is flamed, like flambéing, 75% of the alcohol is retained. You can I'm also noticing that you can add alcohol to a boiling liquid and remove from the heat. So when something is boiling and then you add a bit of alcohol or whatever portions and you remove it, of course, 85% of the alcohol is retained. When there is no heat and it's stored overnight, 70% of the alcohol is retained. So also that can be a bit interesting. Yes, Mark.
Yeah, thanks. This is the kind of argument I always have with many people. When you say cook it for 25 minutes, you retain 40%. What quantities of alcohol are we discussing here? Are you talking about a whole beer or 30 mils of vodka? Because I cannot cook 30 mils of vodka for 2.5 hours.
We were talking about flavors. That's true.
That's madness.
And of course, you cannot bake something for 2 hours as well. So, but if you are simmering for a long time, whatever it is, whatever alcohol content you have put in the drink, in the dish, if you still want to have the flavor of the alcohol in the dish, I'm thinking that the shorter the time, the more you'll be able to taste the alcohol. I think that's what they're going for. And of course, the concentration of the alcohol is important in the dish because it evaporates. The longer you cook it, the more it evaporates and you're losing out on the flavor, that desired flavor. I'm picturing Karunga, even if she has soaked the fruit for so many weeks, when she's baking, she's not baking more than 30 minutes. And maybe that's how we can still taste the alcohol in the cake. So again, timing is everything as well. Also, I'm noticing a small thing is you can actually use alcohol to cook if you want. If you don't have paraffin, you can use alcohol, but that's a proper waste of alcohol. But yeah, please don't cook or bake with alcohol. Otherwise, I think that we have clearly exhausted the topic of alcohol, cooking and baking with alcohol. I noticed that we still have a bit of time. We still have about 15 minutes left. Is there anything else somebody would like to add to this topic?
Yes.
Feel free to interject.
Yes. There must be a safety tip to cooking with alcohol. And don't
Really?
put your, of course, highly flammable open bottles of whiskey or something right next to the open flame.
Oh, yeah.
Alcohol normally comes in glass bottles. There must be some safety tips somewhere that somebody can share with us, I believe. Don't drink too much while cooking, otherwise you might chop off your hand, things like that. Anyone with any ideas, please share. Those are mine.
Well, that's since we are not quite conversant with the alcohol in exploring. Even Karunga doesn't drink it, so she wouldn't even tell us what to do. But yes, Karunga.
For the flambés, the way you pour the alcohol and light it, I know they warn you to be a distance from the fire or the food because you can burn your eyelashes and eyebrows. For the ladies, if you've got wigs on as well, you've got to be mindful if you attempt that.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, James, there's that alcohol that people set on fire before they drink, sambuca.
Sambuca!
In my much younger days, I would set that thing on fire and then hit it back and life would be good. Till I saw a friend of mine set his beard on fire, and that was the last time I ever tried to set it on fire at any one point. No one has talked about cooking with things like sambuca, and I hope that there's no one that has ever tried or has heard of anyone that has tried, because that thing really catches fire so fast.
Yeah, you see, whoever created that idea of lighting it up was crazy. I also feel like that is something when we talked about flavors, especially Stella, we talked about brandy and how it adds to the glaze. I also feel like whiskey can be considered like a salt because it's a bit flavorful. So maybe adding it to a dish, when you think of it like a salt, could like go well with a dish. I feel like the smokiness of a good whiskey could make a particular sauce quite interesting. There's also, I feel like that could also be considered when we are talking about alcohol. Since alcohol by itself carries a flavor. So if it's a flavor that we're talking about, there it means that it can be manipulated to do a particular, to bring out a particular flavor. And I think that a whiskey could be added to a sauce to give it a nice twist, if you know your whiskeys quite well. I know that vodka by itself is a bit flavorless. I noticed that Karunga mentioned it earlier, that it's a good thing she uses to brush onto her cakes. So I think that also that says a lot when I'm talking about flavors. If vodka is a good non-flavorful drink, then whiskey can be a good, if you want to add flavor to a particular dish. She can take away the vodka and add a whiskey. Just a suggestion. And Mark can always give you good suggestions for whiskeys to use. I would like to disclaim a bit, I'm not quite good with the alcohols. So if somebody asked what's the difference between a rum, a brandy, a vodka, a gin, how does one then understand better the alcohol? Maybe that could be our last part of the topic. Yes, Mark.
All those are made from different ingredients. For example, gin is made out of juniper berries. Rum, I think, is made out of sugarcane and sugary things. Vodka is made out of starchy things like potatoes. Brandy is basically wine that is, I think, it's distilled wine. So that's why they all have different alcohol volumes, different flavor profiles, different colors, different weights, because they're all made out of different ingredients. But the process of making them, each has its different process of distillation and comes from a different base ingredients.
I see. I see.
That's why you'll find that brandies are sweeter because they're made out of grapes. They're basically wines.
Yeah.
Whiskeys are mostly, they're also sugary because they're made out of what? Sometimes corn and, you know, fiber things. Rum is sugarcane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Vodka is tasteless because it's purely potatoes, it's just starch.
Yeah.
Gin is juniper berries, that's why it's dry. So those are the differences that I know of the alcohols. Then beer is barley, hops, and all other grains.
Yeah. Yeah. And beer, of course, has different flavors as well. Where does UG fall, the Uganda Waraji?
Waraji is a gin. But I believe our gin, I'm not sure what we make our waraji from, but I know that they normally come from sugarcane and things like that. But I'm not sure about UG, but I know that gin on a general term is made out of juniper berries. Waraji is made here in Lugazio somewhere. I don't know if they have berries there or if they're using sugarcane, but we call it a gin.
Yeah, because when you speak gin. Okay, all right, okay. I see.
Yes, Stella, you're
And
right.
I've
Our
also
wines,
noticed
many
that
come from pineapple, some come from apple, some come from hibiscus flowers. We have quite a number of sources for wine. Why we call them wine, I have no idea, but maybe it's in the process of making it that we decide it's a wine. Why we call our waraji gin, I have no idea, because technically from sugarcane it should be a rum, but we call it a gin because it's dry.
Yeah.
So those are my thoughts on that.
All right.
Hi, Arthur.
Hi, Arthur. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you guys?
All right.
Sorry, I'm late.
We are at the end of the meeting. We are just discussing different aspects of alcohol, but you could share your experience of alcohol when it comes to cooking or baking and baking.
Well, as some of you know, I'm still relatively novice at this. When it comes to cooking with alcohol, I'm not just started baking on any large scale or whatever you want to call it. I've kept it simple, but when it comes to cooking, I typically follow recipes. Right now, there is I have, like I mentioned, I master one thing. I cook one thing many times till I figure it out. I remember. And I now do it with seafood, using mostly white wine. And the white wine that I've found that really that the family enjoys when I do a seafood mix, a seafood platter, is a Pinot, or it tends to be the dry ones, a Pinot or a Chardonnay.
It has to be dry.
It has to be dry. Then if I'm doing a slow cooker with beef or lamb, I go with the red wine. I'm a bit confused because the ones I've tried so far, I have not really felt it in that sense. One time I messed it up where maybe I was so excited, I put a little much and the food was a bit mushy because alcohol, I think, I do not know, it degrades. It confuses me when it comes to meats. But then the one time I did rosé, it actually, the beef stew came out really, really nice.
I've not tried rosé.
Yeah, I'm at the level where I'm still fluking.
Yeah.
You,
But that's a nice
sometimes
mistake.
you get it, sometimes you don't.
It's a nice mistake to learn because I would not have thought of a rosé in beer in with beef.
Exactly. That was it. I don't know how I even came to that. I think I was maybe absent-minded and picked the wrong bottle or something. But it's what I had and it's what I used, and the family loved it. Then
Yeah.
when it comes to, I think that's about drinking. Are we talking about drinking?
No,
I'm
not drink. Just
okay.
eating. Just eating.
Oh, yes, that's my limited experience. But when I do seafood, like prawns, clams, there is a scampia of Volvia that I like that I learned when I was in Venice. It comes out really, really nice. It's a family favorite. A bit costly, but it's quite good. That's so I do it with yes. The one thing I'm going to try now next time is I'm going to risk is I do not know what they do, but is it the flambe? When you see people pouring alcohol in the frying pan and it burns up or whatever it is, I don't know what that is. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's just
flambe.
it's a flambe. Eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what you do with whether it's for braising or whatever it is. So burning off the alcohol.
We were actually talking about that in I think Mark had experience with it, and he said that it didn't really do much to the food, but of course that we're not stopping you from trying, but safety measure,
yeah.
be careful and do it from far. You might lose your beard or eyebrows if you have a beard. Or eyebrows.
Well, yeah. I mean, we are heading into the summer, so I will try to do it outdoor. That side.
And also a good tip for you. Some of the things we've been talking about. We've been talking about a glaze, and I think
glaze, yes.
I saw a nice glaze with for fish, an alcoholic glaze after finishing fish. So if I can find it, I'll share it with you, but maybe on WhatsApp.
Yeah, that's nice. It's so easy to get out of those things outside countries, so it makes it easy.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
All right.
Okay.
So I'll share that. Karunga is going to share for us a beer cake and a nice fruit cake.
A beer cake.
Mark talked about doing meatballs with wine. So that's definitely something. So those are some of the things that we have talked about.
Okay. And
it's about to end. So
yeah. And thanks for tolerating my late coming. My apologies.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Otherwise, if you have no question, you Arthur in particular, we are more or less ending the meeting.
No, it's okay. Thanks. I will stick with this little that I've learned for now. And I'll share experience. Yeah.
And thanks for the rosé tip. We shall consider it.
So, okay.
Right.
Okay.
All right, guys. This is the end of the meeting. Thank you for attending. I see comments on our chat. Of course, Arthur is the scientist. He will go calculatively on every recipe he gets until he masters it.
Yeah.
The gin, that's actually good. Confirmed gin, even if they don't use berries. Wines are made from pineapples, yes. And sugarcane, okay. I think we have gone through all of this. Thank you for attending today. And next week's topic is recipe management, how to come up with a recipe. Like the way we have been experiencing a lot of things, sometimes it's good to actually create your own recipes instead of sticking to a particular recipe. And so we are going to discuss on how to come up with your own recipe. So if you can, please attend. Otherwise, have a nice week.
Yep, thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Bye.